Virginia.
I live in Eureka, but I'm the county supervisor for a portion of the peninsula, and I really appreciate all your efforts.
Pam.
Hi, my husband, who's in the other room right now. We are both members of the PCC, also volunteer trail stewards and Pack Green Team. Live in Eureka.
All right, let me scroll over and Casey.
Hi, I'm the Coastal Programs Coordinator at the North Coast Environmental Center, and I live in Eureka.
How about Dale?
Good evening, Dale Unio, Samoa Fire Chief. Live in Samoa.
Carrie with the cute dog.
Hi, I'm Carrie Tully. I'm the Administrative and Development Director for the North Coast Environmental Center, and I live in McKelleysville.
Isaiah.
Hi, my name's actually Rachel. That's my son's account, and I live in Manila down the road.
All right, Caroline.
Hi, I live in Eureka. I also work for the North Coast Environmental Center. I write for Eco News.
Lia. Okay, we will come back to Lia. Mario.
Hi, I'm Mario and I live in Manila. Thanks for having this meeting.
You're so welcome. Jennifer.
Hey there, I'm Jennifer and I live in Manila as well, between Rachel and Mario. And I work for Surfrider Foundation, so our chapter's been engaged on some of these peninsula issues. And I will turn my video on in a sec. I'm just trying to stock up my firewood before the rain hits. So I'll be right back.
All right. And then Carla.
Hi there, I'm Carla Osborne. I live in Manila on the east side of the highway near the park. And I manage Arcata Pro Floor. I just got home from work. Sorry, I'm late. And I'm on the MCSD board member. Thanks for having the meeting.
And then Lia, did I see you pop up? Well, Leah's my neighbor in Fairhaven. So I also wanted to remind you guys, if you have any questions, we're going to have a big chunk of the meeting. If you look at the agenda, will be dedicated to your questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Carla to do some introductions about the PCC and the sheriff. You're muted.
Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. The Peninsula Community Collaborative, for those of you who don't know, is a group, a resident-led group that's focuses working on improving the feeling of safety on the peninsula. And we focus on improving the physical image, increasing resources to like tsunami safety information, and improving walking and biking, or increasing the walking and biking safety on the peninsula as well. So those are just a couple things that we focus on. Those are like our strategies. And a couple things that we have done is we organized and planned the boulders that were covered in graffiti. Those were covered in graffiti for a long time, and so we got local artists to paint those, and they look really beautiful. Other things that we have done is we worked on Vance Avenue to place boulders because that's a location that unfortunately sees a lot of illegal dumping. And so boulders were recently placed there. And we've held community breakfasts and Manila Park Workday. So there's just a bunch of different things that we do on the peninsula to improve the feeling of safety and to increase connectivity between residents as well. And so that's just like a little brief overview of the Peninsula Community Collaborative. Emily, did you have anything you wanted to add? No? Okay, so Undersheriff Braud, if you wanted to introduce yourself, maybe say a little something about yourself.
Sure. Like I previously said, my name is JD Braud. I'm the Undersheriff for the County of Humboldt. I have been so for the last little over 2 years now. Altogether, I'm in my 20th year of law enforcement. I'm a Humboldt native and have worked for the Sheriff's Department and Eureka Police Department. Part of why I think that I ended up in this meeting and I end up in similar meetings a lot is I have a history of working with these type of issues back starting when I was on the primordial policing team at Eureka Police Department and kind of learned about the concept of primordial policing and how, transitioning the kind of the ideology and standard operating procedures of law enforcement to focus on problems and look at calls for service as whether they're problems or incidents, making sure that we follow up and work with not only the community, but also government partner agencies to come up with long-term solutions.
All right, thank you. And so I think now we can move on to the next agenda item, which is Undersheriff Braud again. He'll be sharing the questions that we shared with him earlier and answering those, and then we'll be opening it up to everyone else.
Sure, you're gonna have to bear with me though, because I'm gonna have to switch back and forth to access them on my phone. So it may be a little bit slow. If you have them in front of you and you want to ask them,
Yeah,
that might be a little bit faster.
Yes, I can pull those up and ask them out loud. So the first one was, and these were questions that were sent to us earlier from the community. We kind of asked people to share questions. So this first one says, can we get a regular presence on the peninsula so the sheriff is visible to everyone?
So that answer is yes and no. Fortunately for everyone on the peninsula, whether it's Manila, Samoa, or Fairhaven residents, you're approximately a 5-minute drive from the sheriff's main station. Since my beginning in 2002, we have always patrolled the peninsula as much as possible, obviously responding to calls for service, but also crime suppression patrols and also deterrence or seeking out criminal activity. As far as assigning somebody out there full time, I mean, it's just not realistic. However, the sheriff's office, the way it's comprised and responding to calls for service, is there's a certain amount of deputies assigned to each beat area 24 hours a day. The area of the peninsula is in that kind of greater Eureka area beat. And so there are at least 2 deputies and a supervisor dedicated to that area 24 hours a day. However, if you look at the size of that beat area, which spans from North Fortuna to South Arcata and from the ocean to the county line to the east, that's a pretty big beat area, and we have to share our services amongst all of the county residents in those areas. So I would say that I don't work patrol anymore, but from what I do know of what's going on and what I know was the standard operating procedures prior to me transitioning out of patrol, that we spend a great deal of time out there as much as possible, both because it's close and because we know there are issues that need to be addressed. So the long and short of it is there will never be a deputy that's just out there full time, but we are very close, a lot faster response than most areas in the county. We are aware of some of those particular hotspot areas, and deputies in between calls for service or investigations, do spend as much time as they can patrolling those areas.
Thank you. So the next question is, how can we best support the sheriff's office in supporting us with dumping and with illegal camping? So how can we best support you?
How much time do you have?
We have time.
So there's a couple different answers to this. I'll start out with just being an advocate for your own services with public safety. And that means that, you know, be aware of your surroundings. If you're not involved in neighborhood watch groups, I highly encourage that and can facilitate our neighborhood watch coordinator participating in another meeting with people who are interested to start those groups in their area. She also has a lot of good information about, you know, our services and what we can do and how to be an advocate. Along with that is, you know, if you see something, say something. As cliche as that sounds, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And it's, you know, another cliche analogy, but it's true. If you see things and you report them and you're diligent about reporting things that matter to you and that matter to the community, you're more likely to get the result you want. But there's a second part to that. And this is one of those I found throughout my career, one of the common misunderstandings about being a good citizen and how you deal with law enforcement. If you want something from the sheriff's office, you need to communicate that. If you do talk with, whether it be dispatch or a deputy, if you just call and report something and you expect that everything that's in your mind as far as what you want to do is going to automatically be what that person translates to the deputies or to what a deputy does, you're wrong. And I use the analogy of a fast food drive-through. You could go there one day and you have somebody who is over the top, smiles, personable, asks you if you need anything extra, make sure you have all your stuff, your orders ready, tells you the specials, smiles, chats you up, and you leave there feeling like, you know, that's the type of person you would leave a tip to. You could come through the same drive-through the next day and have somebody who's doing the bare minimum. They give you the food, they take your money, and not so much as a smile. Those people get paid the same amount of money and they're accomplishing the basic job they're getting paid to do. Law enforcement's unfortunately the same way. You're dealing with people, not robots, that can't be programmed to all be the same. And so you have to advocate for what you want. And what I mean by that is if you're reporting something, let's say like trash dumping, if you want a deputy response, you need to say that. If you want a deputy to contact you before or after they respond to investigate, you need to say that. If you're wanting to file a report rather than them just check on it, you need to say that. If you want to be contacted after the deputies investigating it and hear what's going on and you know, maybe provide additional information or advocate that, you got to say that. Because like it or not, in every profession, you don't get paid more for being a better person at the job. And so unfortunately, you may not get the service you want every time. So it's important that everybody is an advocate for what they want. If you are the victim of a crime and you want the full boat, you want a deputy response, you want the area checked, you want to file a criminal report, you want a restraining order against somebody, you know, a good deputy will hopefully cover all those bases. But I can't guarantee that. And that's where the big miscommunication between law enforcement and the public, I think, happens, is that the public, and I'm not saying this isn't an okay expectation, but the public expects that the deputies are going to do all that stuff on their own, and it just doesn't always happen. And so I'm a big advocate for pushing people to make sure they communicate well what they're asking for. If you are reporting some type of activity and you don't want to be contacted, you don't want the cops to come to your house, tell them that, because they might come to your house. You know, every deputy is going to go about it a little bit differently. You know, they're not all the same. They don't all look at things the same. They don't all factor in everything the same. And so that would be part of my answer, is that be a good communicator of what you're looking for and what you expect out of the situation. And more often than not, even if somebody wasn't going to do those things, if you're asking or bringing them up, then they're probably going to, or at least they're going to communicate with you why they aren't going to. And maybe it'll make sense and you'll come away even more educated than you would have been about a situation like that. Another part to my answer is that, and this kind of ties into the neighborhood watch, is that anything that, law enforcement is very spread thin. We're oftentimes very responsive rather than proactive. We're reactive because we're not everywhere all at once, and things happen when we're not around, especially in areas where people know there isn't going to be law enforcement presence, or they're not going to be observed by the potential witnessing public, like an area like the Vance Frontage Road, or a lot of those turnouts on the peninsula. People go to those areas and are involved in nefarious or activities because they know that there's not a lot of people that will see them do it. So those areas attract that type of behavior. In fact, the other call that I'm on tonight is for Scenic Drive up in Trinidad, because it's a very similar place to the peninsula in that, there's scenic areas, it's a recreational area, it's public property for the most part, which makes it harder to enforce trespassing or camping issues. And there's areas where you can be out of sight. And that's, it's just human nature to look for places to go where people can't see you if you're trying to do things that you don't want people to see. So really taking the effort to make sure that you make your areas hard targets. Like some of what you guys mentioned earlier about the boulders and blocking out turnouts, where you can legally do that, that is an excellent tactic. And what we refer to that in law enforcement, especially in problem oriented policing, is crime prevention through environmental design. And I find that it is one of the most effective problem oriented policing kind of ideologies or tactics. And that could be anything from putting up boulders to block or to prevent access to an area. That could be keeping the brush around your house trimmed low so people can't use it to hide in the shadows. That could be a liquor store, putting cement and rocks in an area where homeless would congregate and lay down and sleep so that they can't do that. It's really it's open-ended to creativity and innovation, as long as it's within legal grounds. And you guys are already doing some of these things. Sometimes you do it using SIPTED, which is what the anagram or whatever it is for that concept. But a lot of it is common sense, and you guys may already be doing it. But sometimes when it's brought up and it's made obvious that it's an actual tactic and that it can be used, it kind of opens up the creativity box for people to look at their own personal property and also the properties that are important to them, and they can look at it through a new lens and come up with ideas to help eliminate some of those problems. I think that I'll let you clarify a little bit more on if there was more to that answer, so I can stop talking and kind of regroup.
No, that sounds good. I'm sure we'll keep talking more about how we can help each other out, but that sounded good. Thank you. The next question was, are you willing to be involved with outreach events like cleanups, so that the whole community can see you as partners in Peninsula Wellness and just interact in like a lower stakes environment?
That's also not a singular answer. I would say yes, and it depends. Obviously, we're willing to do community events. But if that takes deputies off the street who can't respond to emergency calls, then the answer would be no. Now, the sheriff's department does have a unit that's our special services unit that is kind of being molded into the team that would go out and do a lot of these problem-oriented policing outreach with the homeless camps and tackling problems like that. However, we don't have a full-time team like Eureka Police does to handle this stuff. Although if Virginia Bass is listening, this is something that would definitely benefit the county. That unit that we are starting to move in that direction is also responsible for all search and rescues and a bunch of other, very important public safety things. So they are not always available to do stuff. So if there was a specific outreach that was going on that they were available to attend, I would have no problem sending them out there. Depending on what the event is, obviously plays into it a little bit, because we have to maintain, an unbiased involvement in community stuff. But one thing that unit is being more and more involved in is kind of the fledgling part-time primary policing program that I'm working on at this agency, with the ultimate goal of having a full-time team that works with mental health and code enforcement and just full-time tackles problems like this in the community. It trickles down to deputies who then, learn looking at these, long-term solution-driven responses. And I think it is a force multiplier and makes all of our public safety better. But, that there are there's always something, whether it's staffing or budget, but that's what we're working towards. So my end answer to that is yes, we would, and we do outreach at camps and stuff where we do take enforcement and bring services out, and we would potentially be willing to go out on other community outreach events, of which is pretty open-ended, but I can't guarantee the availability.
Thank you. The next question is, would installing cameras that can catch license plates help you prosecute illegal dumpers? And then will actions be taken if you have a license plate number?
Yes, and this kind of ties back into what I talked about earlier, is that law enforcement is very reactive. It's just the nature of the beast. We do, in between calls for service, really push for proactive enforcement to prevent crimes before they occur, to catch criminals before they commit their next crime. But reactive is the reality of a nearly 4,000 square mile county with maybe 9 deputies working that at one time. So now littering crimes are important, especially the ones that are even more specifically towards environmental crimes, where you have waste disposal and stuff like that. And we will enforce that just like any other violations of the law that were presented evidence of. But there's a couple problems with it. One, it's an infraction. It's basically a ticket. It's $1,000 fine if you look at the signs on the peninsula, which we will definitely enforce. But what I know from personal experience is that sometimes they're hard to prove. So what you're saying is, as far as cameras, I think they're a great idea. Cameras are never a bad thing to prevent crimes. Oftentimes, if we were to come out of this meeting and I have some ideas on how you guys go about this next, although the peninsula isn't just one singular problem. There's actually two different projects I'm working on the peninsula that are completely different issues. But one of the things that I think is really important, if you did cameras, is to collaborate with us to do some sort of press release where we're addressing some of the environmental issues that are going on in the peninsula, and then highlighting some of the steps we're taking as a community and as law enforcement and other government partner groups in this. And oftentimes just people hearing that enforcement is going to be stepped up, or that new restrictions or that cameras are being installed on the peninsula to deter crime, that in and of itself will deter crime. So as part of that bigger picture, cameras are great. If we can get footage that helps us solve a crime, we'll absolutely use it. It may only be issuing somebody a ticket, unfortunately, because littering is an infraction. There are some other littering type crimes which can venture into more of a misdemeanor realm potentially, but still their crimes where a custodial arrest is highly unlikely. And so I've dealt with crime littering type cases where I've issued citations. I've gone to people's houses and confronted them, and they went back and cleaned it up, and the homeowner or property owner was good with that. There's a lot of different outcomes. Law enforcement is a gray area, and that can be good or bad, but I think it's good because we try to operate with the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. So if a property owner has somebody they catch dumping and they say, listen, if the person comes back and cleans it up, I don't want to press criminal charges. Technically we're not enforcing the law. We're kind of working out a civil issue, but that's why I've always believed that we're not really law enforcement officers, we're peacekeepers, and enforcing the law is just one tool as part of keeping the peace that we use. So long-winded answer, refined and distilled down to a short answer, yes, if you present evidence of a crime, we will investigate it. Having more evidence to identify perpetrators will make it easier, and yes, action should be taken. But it might not be the type of action that you would want for something egregious like dumping.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I like your idea about a press release and working together and doing something like that. So the next question is, do you know how many people have been charged with illegal dumping like this year or in the last 5 years?
So I have an answer,
Mhm.
but I'm going to preface my answer by saying that in the last couple of years, we completely redid our computer-aided dispatch and report writing databases. We moved from a kind of an antiquated system to a much better improved system, which collaborates with other agencies. It increases and streamlines communication between law enforcement agencies, which is a great thing. However, when we did so, it completely erased a tremendous amount of the prior data that we had, and there was no controlling that. The company could not fix that. It's just a matter of we lost a lot of data that cannot be retrieved. We were able to transfer, I think, all, if not close to all, of the actual crime reports, but calls for service, which might show a citation, maybe not are all recorded going back more than a couple of years. But the data I did get from our records manager was that a combination of like the main 3 littering type sections, there was 39 citations issued in the last 5 years. There could be a whole lot more than that, because as we issue citations, they get shipped off to the courts for enforcement. So I don't know if the record retention of those, how long we keep that, especially if the case has been settled in a court, like traffic court or something like that. So it could be more than that, but that was the number they gave me. So, and that's for all of Humboldt County, not just on the peninsula. I could not get a number for how many littering citations have been issued on the peninsula.
Thank you.
There's actually, if I could interrupt once, there's another tiny part to that too, is that a lot of the outreach we do on these homeless camps, whether they're public or private property, we do work with partner agencies, one of which is the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I know that they issue citations for littering and other environmental crimes a lot too. So they could have issued, and I know that Fish and Wildlife has issued some of those citations at the camp, which some of you guys have referred to as Shantytown. So I know that they have some citations have been issued there by Fish and Wildlife that would not be part of our records.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question that I have is, could the sheriff's office support a reward program to encourage reporting illegal dumpers?
I asked around about that, and I really don't know the answer. If you mean support, like we, encourage it or condone it, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't. Whether we can get county funds to provide as a reward, I really don't know. I know that county funds cannot be gifted. So I really don't know that going down that road, that's anything that we could do. Now, if it was a community group that was offering a reward for stuff, and would we, be okay with that? I mean, we don't really have any control over that. If any of these groups on the peninsula wanted to offer rewards for people, then that would, now I know that there, in some higher profile cases, there's been offers of rewards for information leading to an arrest and stuff. I just don't know how that would work in a situation like this. And I would have to consult with county council and my boss further about that. So, I mean, it's not a bad idea, but I really don't think that that's necessary, because I really don't know if the juice would be worth the squeeze, if you understand what I mean. Like, I think that we would be better off educating people on the peninsula, all of you guys and your neighbors, to get in neighborhood watch groups, to be better reporting parties, to advocate for your communities and your properties, to have a good partnership with law enforcement, work with us, whether that be outreach, just being good, witnesses, good reporters on stuff, getting good crime data collection or evidence, learning and implementing some of these strategies that problem morning policing concepts that we are trying to push out to the community to help protect themselves and help law enforcement protect them better. So I really think that we are going to get more out of that route than a reward, but I don't know 100% if that's something how that would work is my answer.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that was all the early questions that we had. So now we can open it up to the rest of the group. Jody, did you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, if you have a question, just please raise your hand or do the little emotion that has the raised hand.
You could also put it in the chat and I could read it if you'd like.
I have a question. And my question is related to encampments and reporting. And I guess I missed my opportunity, and I think I was supposed to fess up to my employer is the county. I work for County Environmental Health, just for full transparency there. So I have a role in a lot of this stuff, and dumping is kind of a tangential thing for the solid waste LEA program. And I'm not here to really talk about any of that stuff, more about my participation as a community member in Manila. And I live on Peninsula, and I have little kids, and we really enjoy walking out to the beach through the woods and stuff. And there's spots in the dunes where folks live, and I understand that there's a need for people to have homes. I think that those places are inappropriate and create a real safety concern for me, my wife, and my children. I know where to report some of those things. Code enforcement has a large role in addressing some of those encampments, but my conversations with code enforcement have clarified that the sheriff's office plays a big role in addressing the occupants of those encampments, and code enforcement can do a lot to mitigate and clean up after the fact, but the sheriff's office and Health and Human Services need to cooperate. And I from what I understand is that that's happening, but we need to staff the sheriff's office so they can follow up in a timely manner. I don't know. It seems that we are close to a metropolitan center, so folks can regularly cross this bridge and occupy Dog Ranch. And I'm really excited about the development with that for us. And I feel like that's a positive thing with Friends of the Dunes taking, I'm not sure if it's ownership or if it's what the responsibility is there, but it sounds like a good thing. But I guess my ask and my question is, for these discrete kind of tents in the woods, which really freak me out, where should those be going? Thanks for that.
You guys apparently just like to hear me talk, because there's not a good answer for anything yet that's not long-winded. So I'm going to apologize in advance, because this is a conundrum here. So in a nutshell, the Boise decision out of Idaho, obviously, has changed the entire landscape of enforcement of trespassing and homelessness and all those associated crimes. For those that don't know, the Boise decision, which is, I think, in the past couple of years, it basically, the courts have stated that you can't criminalize someone's lack of a place to sleep. And there have been absolute nightmares created out of this decision and law enforcement's inability to do any enforcement. And it doesn't apply to private property per se, but I mean, like our county council doesn't want us enforcing any homeless related crimes whatsoever. It is a juju bad hot topic thing. And on top of that, we're in a pandemic where the county and the state are trying to tell people to limit non-essential travel, stay out of public areas. And the unfortunate part about that is that even private property campers like the shantytown area have nowhere to go but out into the streets. There's nowhere for them to go, which is why that project has stalled since March, when we were on the verge of evicting that group with permission from the property owners. We were helping them start the eviction process because many of them had been there for, multiple years and had established structures on the property. And I don't want to bore you guys with the weeds on that, but it establishes some legal hurdles for us. But the Dune area is comprised of some private property, but mostly public property areas. And that's really where this problem lies with us, is that unless we can find a way to get services to those people and relocate them, which is part of our new strategy using, collaborative outreach with Department of Health and Human Services. We've had the Environmental or Coastal Commission come out with us. We use code enforcement, adult protective services, Arcata House, shelters, trying to get people in touch with something to help get them somewhere other than camping in these green belts outside our neighborhoods in the county. But there is absolutely zero we can do enforcement wise for people camping on public property. The DA's office isn't going to touch it, and the county council is not going to support our enforcement of it whatsoever. And I have conversations with them about it quite regularly. It's going to take an innovative approach, and I think we're doing that. I think we've become a multi-tool with these issues instead of a hammer. And we've had success, but this is a problem that's nationwide, and nobody has a good solution yet. Everybody is really trying to be innovative and use more outreach, but there's more homeless people now than there's ever been. And there's a lot of socioeconomic reasons. You could blame a lot of different things, but it's not going away, and we are going to have to do something different than what we used to, because people can't even be moved off of some of those areas if they're public property. Now, part of like what we're doing with the project on the peninsula with the campers and the motorhomes and cars, and some of that has come to fruition already. If any of you have seen the new signs we've put out there, and they took my advice on making them a lot taller, making them red so they're enforceable parking areas, listing times, and that coupled with deputy patrols and enforcement. Although you did say there's a couple new abandoned cars since yesterday, but it's already making a difference, because people don't want $1,000 ticket or, another, they will add up and they're getting attention they don't want, but it's not going to solve the problem entirely, because if people don't have a place to go, they're going to go somewhere. And that's kind of what the Boise decision talked about, is that we can't penalize people for not having somewhere to go. The human side of it is coming through in the court decisions now. And I'm not saying that's an entirely bad thing, but it's not fair for our communities. And you could also argue that those public areas are supposed to be everybody's. And if some people are using them in an inappropriate way that deters others from their, right to safely and comfortably use it, then that shouldn't be fair. And I agree, but we have no enforcement to do this. And I'm not speaking just from a law enforcement perspective. I live in Fortuna, and I have homeless people camped in the woods behind my house, committing burglaries in my neighborhood, trespassing, using drugs. I find needle. I can't let my kids go out in the woods at all. It's a constant issue. So I feel your pain. Fortuna police will do nothing about it. And I have to come home and go back to work when I come home. So I definitely feel your pain. I am not turning a blind eye to it like some in law enforcement I feel traditionally have. And just know that we are already working on some of those projects on the peninsula. However, an unprecedented pandemic like this has put everything on hold as far as making progress. Now, we have talked about getting the outreach going again, and are going to start treading back into where we were, but ultimately some of those people are not going to be willing to accept help, and we have nowhere to put them. And that's an unfortunate but reality answer.
So does that also apply if there are code enforcement violations, such as, I don't know if everybody was privy to, Jack Durham recently talked about the spot on the east side of the highway on the bay where folks were sort of building structures. Is that
Yeah, that's the shanty town that we're talking about. And we
okay?
We've been working on that since last February. We were actually making some good strides, but here's the problem. It is private property, and we can then enforce trespassing and some of the violations that go along with that. However, the property is undeveloped, owned by people that don't live here. I don't know if they've ever been here. They live out of the area. They're elderly, and they basically are hands off on the property. It has been allowed to be in its current condition for so long. There's a couple residents there, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but they've been living out there for almost 10 years. So us just arbitrarily after 10 years trespassing them off the property isn't as simple as that. And in reality, the owners are going to have evictions to go along with it, because these people have built structures there, and you start getting into the landlord tenant laws with how long they've been there and eminent domain. I mean, we can't enforce civil stuff unless it's ordered by a judge, and that's going down a really muddy road. But it's one of those things where we can't. And if you add to that, also during this pandemic, judges aren't ordering evictions unless they're emergencies based on health, life, safety issues, and that's not one they're going to do during. So,
JD, can I add something here when you're on this one with the group's agreement? Is that okay? One of the things I've been thinking of that has been useful in the past is actually the nuisance lawsuit. And that's what City of Eureka, several people who live there are used against Floyd Squires. We used it years ago when my family's restaurant had a really horrible out-of-town landlord who just let all sorts of horrible things happen. And it's something that's in small claims court. And I suggested, it could be another tool just from the standpoint of making it really uncomfortable for an out-of-town landlord to have multiple people basically pinging them for money. So it could be another tool, because I think, Undersheriff Braud is absolutely right. Their hands are tied in a lot of ways, but this is where I think we need creative thinking and trying to get people to look at, well, how can we do it if law enforcement can't, and if code enforcement can't, what else is there? So I just want to say, I know we're focusing on, more the traditional type of route, but I really think there are opportunities that don't necessarily have to press on law enforcement to get it done. And anyway, we can talk more about that later, but and I want to say I really appreciate Undersheriff Braud doing this today. I feel really old now because his grandpa was my teacher in junior high or high school. Anyway, I feel really old tonight, just saying. But
hey, Supervisor, aren't you in your early 30s? I'm confused.
Oh yeah, and you're 10, right? So but anyway, and I have some other thoughts too, but they're doing great. It just takes a little bit of thinking differently also that I think could help, because I also tell you guys right now, I know our campsite has closed. I didn't find out until Public Works sent something to me today. They did not even reach out to Health and Human Services. And so I've tried to draw those pieces together, but it's a very, very, Undersheriff Braud said, it's very complicated. But like I said, I think we need to just kind of think different ways. And this is not the best forum to have that discussion, but I'm more than happy to have that discussion on how do we think a little differently. And anyway, I'll return it back to Undersheriff Braud. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just really thought, I think there's some way we can help.
Yeah, well, you can interrupt anytime, Supervisor. Thank you. And just here's what I'll tell you guys is that I don't get to do a lot of the same stuff in my job anymore. I'm much more of an inside cat than an outside cat now, but I do have a passion for this type of work. I feel like I have experience in it and really want to make sure that it's taught to my deputies now. So this is carried on and improved upon. So I can commit to you guys. I will continue with these projects till we come to a good solution. It may take time, but I won't abandon the project. I have already been basically working on one of these projects for almost a year now, and I don't have any intention of going anywhere. It may not be something I work on every single day, but if you guys continue to have meetings, I will continue to participate. I will continue to educate you guys on problem-oriented policing, how to help yourselves, how to help us more. And I do think that we can come up with good solutions. And part of how I know that is that we've already made some strides despite a pandemic and the laws working against us. We have gotten some people moved out of those areas. More come back, and that's because Eureka is doing a good job of moving those people out of Eureka. But us working with Eureka, and I have good communication with their CSET and POP teams and their administration, and it's really, law enforcement used to be able to deal with these things very easily. Like, this is a nail, we're a hammer, we're just going to do what this tool does and do the law enforcement role of it. But it's not that way anymore. We have to come with a whole bag of tools. We're doing complicated surgery, not construction, on some of these issues. But I do commit to helping you guys. Obviously we're not going to solve it tonight, but it's good for you guys to know that I am on this, and I'm educating people to help me with it. We've already made some significant strides, and there are, and Supervisor Bass knows this, there's already some ongoing email strands between department heads and representatives from some of the agencies. And this is stuff that we are working on. It's just, we're working upstream without a paddle, but I'm a pretty good swimmer. So I think I can get us a little ways. But just to finish answering my question from earlier, the code enforcement role. Yes, code enforcement does enforce abatement issues on properties. And yes, they can assist with cleanup, but the shanty town, and I wasn't calling it that till somebody from this group did. So I apologize if that's offensive to somebody, but I think it clarifies what we're talking about. But with that particular one, code enforcement can't take action against the people who are camping there. Code enforcement can only take action against the property owners who are elderly out of towners who know nothing about what's going on this property. So you could probably imagine the counterproductive nature of code enforcement threatening fines and civil procedures against an elderly couple who own this property who don't know anybody that's on it and never gave anybody permission to be there. So, just to give you kind of an insight into one of the many issues plaguing that particular problem, is that code enforcement enforcing this against the property owners doesn't do a whole lot. They're willing to cooperate. They signed trespass notices. They're willing to go through the eviction process, but judges aren't hearing evictions during the pandemic. So when the pandemic is over, we will be able to probably get that one finalized, although it will be a couple-month project, including multiple outreach, which if any of you guys want to come out and help do cleanup, help bring food to the people, whatever you guys want to do, whatever your fancy is for how much you want to be involved in Peninsula improvement, I can make available some sort of notification to this group, or if we establish an ongoing group email or some sort of contact chain, those that want to assist further and come out, I open invitation to you.
Thank you. We'll definitely keep up with you and see how we can help doing those things. We had a question in the chat that says, there are signs being placed along New Navy Base Road that say no parking from 10 to 5. And will there be enforcement of these signs? I think this was answered, but.
Yeah, yes. And again, I can see both sides. Would we rather not have a bunch of signs, kind of destroying the view of such a beautiful area? I get it, but you get, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We either don't have signs and we have constant problems of people that have nowhere to go, turning that into their private campground and dumping waste, or we put all these signs up as part of an enforcement effort. We use other SIPTED concepts like, blocking areas of boulders, issuing, maybe even changing the county code to change the use allowances of certain areas. And then it removes some of those people that are nefarious or involved in impropriety, and we can have that public area back where more people can enjoy it safely. So you pick your poison. These signs are, I mean, as much as they aren't beautiful, are a part of this area getting fixed. And so I think they have to stay in there. I think they're a great addition. They did exactly, well, for the most part, what I asked. So I'm pleased with them. And you know what? If you walk past them, you can't see them. So that's my stance on it.
So will the no parking be enforced from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.?
Yes, and I don't know if I sent it out to you guys. There's a vehicle code section for parking in a marked red zone, and deputies have already been instructed to enforce any applicable vehicle codes and/or trash dumping or littering or unlawful disposal of waste on the peninsula, and obviously any other sections that are posted, like the code sections from the county. But I also, in my conversation with county council about it, she did not want me to, she wanted to make sure we are not enforcing anything that even resembles homelessness or trespassing or illegal camping, and to make sure that, we have to be very careful about enforcing other things that would seem we are picking on people that are homeless.
And maybe this is a question for Supervisor Bass or others. Why isn't someone from here telling the shantytown property owners about the possibility of code enforcement fines?
Well, since, I wish we had John Ford on here because he could say whether he actually has or hasn't. I think it'd be kind of, I can't say for sure he hasn't. Let's put it that way. If it's in the pipeline, there's probably been some communications. But what I noticed with code enforcement, because there are code enforcement cases that literally last years. And what happens often is someone, like maybe an elderly couple, has a bunch of extenuating circumstances. And so what you think should be a really easy situation can take a very long time. And sometimes it actually ends up in front of the board because someone's not able to do it. And then we have to put liens on the property. But it's a very long process. And I would suspect, I could check with John, but I would think there may have been communications. But again, I go back to the nuisance lawsuit, which I know it takes it out of the county's hand. But what it does is enough people file a nuisance lawsuit in the small claims court and there's no attorneys involved. It puts, I'm sorry these people are elderly. I feel badly for them that people are on their properties, but that doesn't mean that everybody else needs to suffer forever, right? So I do think, besides code enforcement, there may be another avenue to follow, and that actually may move faster than county government, because unfortunately, I came from the private sector. When I got into local governments, oh my gosh, nothing gets done without a really thorough process. So, but we can certainly ask John Ford if something has been served on the folks and what the response has been, and I'll put them down on my list and I will take care of that. How's that? And I may not have a good answer.
I know they have been notified. Whether they've been served an official notice, I don't know, but they're fully aware. I've talked to them on the phone. They want to cooperate. They didn't even know people were on their property. They, like I said,
Can I add something? I want to add something on behalf of environmental health and a little bit of some work that we were doing. We gave them 2 notices back in 2017, and we wrote multiple letters to the property owners. And so since 2017, we had an initial process where environmental health would come out because we received complaints about solid waste and surfacing sewer situations and concerns about the public health component, which there are many. And so that process has been completed, and this, of course, this site is not unique in the county. There are multiple other sites, but for me, this takes a special priority because it's so close to the bay. And I think there are some water quality issues and some coastal act issues which need to be addressed. And I think that maybe that's another tool that I haven't heard of how either our planning department and John Ford, or is that the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission to do some enforcement for development in the coastal zone? And so, you know, I feel like on one hand, it's not appropriate for me to pursue with my environmental health hat, because that's kind of someone else's jurisdiction. But on the other hand, it is kind of my business because it's a stone's throw from my house. And I'm worried about the bay, and I'm worried about the oyster production, which is another stone's throw beyond that. So all these concerns are kind of interrelated, and I think that makes this site a special priority, which needs special attention from all capacities in the county, in the state coastal commission, and perhaps at CDPH, shellfish protection. So I'm not, you know, I think that the owners are well aware of the problem, and they have been since 2017. I think that there is a perspective about the homeless encampment that we have to be sympathetic to, but now in nearly 2021, it's getting kind of long in the tooth for tiptoeing around the issue.
I have a couple of quick responses to that. Is that if I misspoke, I apologize. I can't say that they didn't know anything, and obviously in your revelation they do. What I meant was they don't know anybody they have not given permission for anybody to stay there. They don't know who it is. They're saying, yes, we don't want anybody on the property. We want to remedy whatever abatement issues there are. So just for that clarification, that the people on the property don't have permission to be there, but they've been there for years, some of them. The other thing I was going to say is that in some of our outreach responses there, Josh Line from Coastal Commission and Investigator Soth from Code Enforcement both responded with me to the property on at least one occasion and took pictures. So the Coastal Commission is well aware of all the violations. They took pictures and they were concerned. So really the only reason that I think this is stalled out, honestly, is the pandemic, because we were making good progress. We had done 3 or 4 separate joint outreaches where we brought services, we brought mental health, we brought adult protective services, trying to get these people, you know, into treatment, into housing somewhere other than there. And like I said, the pandemic hit right in the middle of this, and everything has been stalled since then.
Okay, there's another question in the chat that says there's a trailer parked on Vance Avenue and there are no parking signs from 10 to 5 a.m. Can this be ticketed? And I'll add in there, if so, how?
Yes, if there is a vehicle parked in an area that has posted signs they're in violation of, I would call the Sheriff's Department and or the California Highway Patrol, because that is, and we're going down another rabbit hole here, but the Sheriff's Office, it has responsibility for enforcement of crimes, investigation of crimes in all unincorporated areas of the county. However, the California Highway Patrol is through, I don't know if it's an MOU or I don't remember the exact terminology of the agreement, but California Highway Patrol basically handles all highway enforcement, parking violations, collision investigations, DUI enforcement on highways and roadways. And 255 and New Navy Base Road are both their jurisdictions. So parking enforcement, stuff like that, is the primary jurisdiction of CHP. And they are aware of the project on the peninsula that we've been working on with the parking issues. So I could definitely get one of a representative from their Humboldt office to be on any future calls if you guys would like to talk more with them about that part.
I'm guessing we would be very interested in that. Here's a question from Emily. It says, can you clarify that CHP has jurisdiction of New Navy Base Road? She was thinking that was the
they have jurisdiction for all public roadways in unincorporated areas. They also have jurisdiction for certain incidents that occur on the 101 corridor through Eureka. So that there's some unique jurisdictional boundary issues as it goes through incorporated areas. But The sheriff's department has the ability to do parking and traffic enforcement in any unincorporated areas or incorporated areas, but the primary jurisdiction for that is the California Highway Patrol.
Thank you for that. Just to clarify further, the new signage on New Navy Base Road is reporting about parking during the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. is reporting to the sheriff's office still appropriate at that location?
I think that the proper reporting would be to CHP first, as it's technically their primary jurisdiction for parking related stuff along the roadway. If it ventures off the roadway and it's more of a trespassing or other type of crime issue, then it's ours. They only handle crimes associated with public roadways. And I haven't done any of the backstory on those signs. I'm assuming that they wouldn't have installed them if they don't have the ability to authorize enforcement of that section for those areas. So as long as that is all been worked out with planning and building and public works, then as far as I'm concerned, it's enforceable by my agency, and they've been instructed to do so.
Okay, any other?
I had a question. I was wondering if you would be able to update us on any progress that might be made in solving the murder of Perry Bailey that took place out in Samoa.
I'm not working the case myself. I know that we have one of our investigators assigned to it. They're actively working all leads. It is still an open investigation, so I'm not at liberty to discuss details, but it is an active investigation and they are following up on all leads.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question from someone that emailed me that couldn't be here tonight. Her concern was illegal driving out in the dunes and the beaches, and she's just like concerned about the environmental consequences of that, and then also people have had close encounters with OHV riders, and so they're concerned for their safety as well walking out in the dunes. And so I'm not sure how you could address that.
So we do have an off-highway vehicle program that's part of our special services division. The ones I mentioned earlier, who I'm trying to mold that unit into handling these type of problems until we have an actual dedicated unit. They do have the ability and do make sure there is time set aside for off-highway vehicle patrols like the beaches and waterways, rivers. But we're talking about a group of 2 guys, soon to be 3 guys, for 4,000 square miles that has a lot of waterways and stuff. So I would say that if they're, just like we talked about earlier, if you see something you think needs to be looked into, report it and request to be looked into. With the beaches out there, there are definitely prohibited uses, but there are also allowed uses. So it depends on the area. It depends on if they're licensed. Some areas do not enter the beach without permission or without specific permission. So, I mean, a lot goes into determining whether somebody is lawfully somewhere and whether they're lawfully there and also obeying all the associated laws and restrictions. So, I mean, really, you could report every single time you saw somebody out there, and if we actually caught them, we could determine they were all there lawfully. Now, whether they're being sharing the land appropriately with other people, that's a whole displaying good etiquette, that's a whole nother issue that is not really law enforcement. But I guess the short answer is that if you call and report something you believe to be a violation, we will get to it. But again, I will say that for that specific area, 3 deputies covering, such a huge area, they may not be available when it's happening. And so a delayed response may end up in the incident not being resolved, unfortunately.
And I don't want to get political here or anything, but there's a lot of conversation about defunding police and trying to divert dollars. And I know that the sheriff gets great heartburn, and I hope you guys are kind of hearing that there's a real challenge. And it's like our sheriffs are already dealing, trying to dealing with the human aspect, but it's like, this is a huge county. It's like 4,000 square miles, and it's really hard for anyone to get the coverage that they'd like to see. So, I don't know what Undersheriff Braud would suggest, but I just really hope that people can support, whether it's the POP or whatever comes to us, as saying this is important. Because when you can do that and you say it to the board, it really does make a difference in where the dollars go. And to me, these guys are completely underfunded to do what they need to do. That's just my personal editorial.
Hi, Virginia. I really appreciate that comment, and I agree. I think there's a little bit of frustration that happens when folks in our community are aware and know the folks that are riding the off-highway vehicles, and we know where they live. And I am 95% confident that the sheriff knows where they live. And so it's not a difficult thing to say that, I know the rider of this quad. I know when he's riding, and I can take you to him right now. And sort of, there's a little bit of lack of enforcement that can be documented. No, I don't write it down, and no, I don't take his picture. Because that kind of exposes me to reciprocal animosity, which I'm not really excited about. But a yellow quad that lives a stone's throw from my house, right by the bay, is that very rider. And that person has been there for 10 years, and that person has lived at that encampment for 10 years, and the sheriff knows it. And that's the kind of thing that we need to see enforced. And that is the same rider that rides through across the street from my house into the community center, down the trail, and across and all along the beach. Like there are no rules. Manila is the Wild West.
And Mario, and I have to say, anyone on the call, Mario is your, he's your like a super duper special weapon, because I'm glad you're on here tonight, because I know you were really concerned, and normally when you and I are together, we're like trying to battle something out between people who don't necessarily agree. But maybe part of it is, and I'm sorry Supervisor Wilson isn't on this. I know he had Coastal Commission this week, so knowing how they go, he could still be in that meeting. But I think it'd be interesting just to like get a little more education on what you know and what you see, because I understand Undersheriff Braud and the team feel pretty underrepresented and unable to necessarily do everything, but maybe you and I can get together. That's not necessarily talking about county like environmental health. Say, I'm interested to know, what are these people? Who are they? And if they've been there for so long, let's figure out how to like make it really uncomfortable for them. Anyway, I do appreciate you're on this call. There's Jen.
Hi, sorry to interrupt.
Hey, Jen.
I thought you were done. Hi. Yeah, I'm Mario. Mario, I'm glad you're on the call too, because you're articulating a lot of my feelings. But having lived out there for 18 years, I just have really low expectations, which is nothing personal to Undersheriff Braud. It's the same message all the time, which is the sheriff doesn't have resources to do anything out here. And so it doesn't matter, like anyone who's on the beach with regard to illegal driving, you can tell the difference between someone who has a permit, they're in a truck, they're driving slowly, it's respectful. I mean, I don't know if they all have permits or something, but like people can get a permit to collect driftwood or fish in certain situations and whatever. And there's a huge difference between that and people on dirt bikes and quads or in trucks hauling ass down the beach, doing donuts, just like it's a very different situation. And I've taken a million pictures over the years because I'm always like, that jerk. And it does, but it's pointless. There's no, I mean, nothing's going to come of it. And that's just, yeah, I mean, there's not enough people, there's not enough sheriff's officers to have a dedicated sheriff, as Undersheriff Braud said. We shouldn't expect that to ever happen, is the message. And so it really is just like, this is not a priority. So I don't know. I just feel like there isn't an answer. It's just like, suck it up, and and that's just kind of it. And just be glad that what is out here is out here. But it's frustrating. The driving on the beach has gotten like the most out of control I've ever seen it. And it's a real drag for people that enjoy the beach. And I'm not opposed to driving on the beach in appropriate places, but this isn't the appropriate place.
I think the signs have helped, actually. The signs that I believe it was at the work of the PCC. I think that really has reduced driving, at least at the community center right there. I see far fewer quads.
Maybe we just need to make more cute signs, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely tracks on the beach still, but they aren't. I do think that it's helped having all those signs right there. I'm really pleased. Just a quick digression. All those signs that were put out, but that it looks like, I mean, they're all on the peninsula. I drive up and down all the time, and I'm so heartened to see that how many are still there. So that's like a very positive community solution. And again, I mean, no offense to Undersheriff Braud, it just feels like a little talking in circles because we just know there's not the resources, and it's not, with everything else going on in the county and various crimes and needs, to expect somebody to come out and prioritize catching somebody on the beach. But I don't know, like Mario, to your point, yeah, we know who these people are, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not encouraging vigilantism, because I'm not really ready to be a vigilante. So
no, but some of those, if you have a quad, it enables transportation of firewood, groceries, lumber, roofing materials, chimneys, to places where you can't normally get to. And that kind of exaggerates a problem that we're all experiencing. So if we remove that capability, perhaps there would be a little less convenient to occupy places that normally wouldn't be occupied.
Are you talking about somebody like who lives in a house out there that has this quad you're talking about, or somebody that's living in a what would be described as more of like an illegal or inappropriate camp that has this quad?
No, specifically what you've called the shanty town. And there's an occupant that lives in the shanty town with a metal roof over his structure. And that's the fella that drives the yellow quad.
Gotcha. I've never seen it. It wasn't there any of the times that I've been there, but that's not a huge issue. We can take care of that. That's the first time I've ever heard of a yellow quad. And if he's out there, we can definitely address that. It would be a lot harder if you were talking about a resident who lives out there who decides to ride a quad from his house onto the beach and enjoy the public area, licensed or not. It's a lot harder to enforce that because, you get down to etiquette. If somebody was out there and being mindful of the vegetation, the wildlife, and had etiquette, you probably wouldn't even care if they were licensed or not. But just to touch on what you guys were talking about, improper use of those dunes area. I mean, it goes back to, if you provide irrefutable evidence of a crime, and we can't not enforce it, but those crimes are extremely hard to enforce. And you could talk about, all for, like you said, is it worth, we could definitely follow through with stuff like that, but to issue somebody like a $50 ticket, it might not deter the activity, and we can't be there all the time to prevent it. So, and when we do stuff like that, enforcement's going to require witnesses most likely, and that puts the citizens in an uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous situation, like you spoke of earlier, that sometimes it's not very comfortable to be a good witness or a good help to law enforcement and have that partnership, because people hold grudges and but I can assure you that nobody on the peninsula has any additional sway or special privileges as a result of any relationships with us. I've been working here since 2002, and I've never known or seen that to happen. The staffing issue, I'm not going to keep making excuses for it, because I think that some of it is that, but I refer back to the drive-through analogy, which I truly believe is very symbolic of law enforcement issues with the community sometimes, is that if two people get paid the same and one does an outstanding go the extra mile job and the other person doesn't, their pay doesn't change. And we don't always hear about that. So, I mean, another way to look at that is if you're not getting the service you want from the deputy that you got, and you've made sure that you've, eliminated the communication issue about what your expectations are, maybe it should be something that you ask to talk to a supervisor about. There's nothing wrong with quality control, and a deputy may take offense to it, but oh well, that's part of being an employee at any job, whether it's private or public, is that there's an expectation of quality. I mean, my expectation for deputies is the same way that I did every call for service I've been to in my entire career, and that's a lot, is that I give everything I have. I want to be exactly what the people wanted. I want to solve the problem for them, and I want them to be pleased. And to this day, I've never had a citizen complaint. Now, if I could model everybody after my idea and vision of law enforcement, I would, but that's impossible. And, that's what supervisors or managers do, is as you move up the chain of command in law enforcement, you become more quality control as a result of community service. So, I mean, that is a huge part of my job, is quality control. And it can't start at me. It has to start at the line level supervisor. But again, if you have provided evidence of something going on that needs to be dealt with, and you've communicated what your expectations are, and you feel that you were not provided the service, without fear of retribution, you can ask to talk to a supervisor and get a second opinion on it. And if you don't like what the supervisor says, you can always ask to go up to a manager. Now, how important it is to you is something only you know in your heart, and how far you're willing to take it. But I like I said, some of it is communication too. I've learned over the years that sometimes complaints that people had about deputies not taking action on something didn't boil down to the deputy being lazy or not wanting to. That does come into play, no doubt, though, and I'm free to admit that. I've seen it, experienced it myself, but oftentimes it's a communication issue. If it's like, hey, I saw people on the beach, I took a picture. Well, in this picture, I know you can't see a license plate or you can't tell who it is, but I want you to do something about it. But it ends there. Like I said, if you go to a restaurant and and your food's not right, are you the type of person that's going to take it, or are you going to ask for it to be fixed? And that's how the type of reporting party you need to be to law enforcement. If it's important to you, make sure the communication about what you want is clear. If it's not that important and you're like, hey, I'm just throwing that out there so you guys could do something if you want, but I don't really care, well, we might not take care of it.
I just want to say that what you said tonight about being really clear with your expectations and what you want when you report something is really valuable. And I very much appreciate that, because I think that is, I can really relate to that when I have said, like, a thing happened, but then, not necessarily what I want done specifically,
Yeah.
or known to ask for that. So just, I really want to call that out and thank you for that, because that's
Yeah. And I've seen it in real life, every supervisory course I've ever been to, every management course, and just real life relationship issues with your boss, with your friends. It's always communication breakdown. You could pay all this money to be sent to this fancy class to teach you about being a leader or a supervisor, and ultimately you distill all the talk down, and it's communication. And I truly think that a lot of the issues with defund the police and all that stuff is a communication issue. It's cops not all being programmed the same, and communication not being clear from them about not being that outstanding public servant that wants to leave every call solved with everybody happy, smiling, and people in the community not communicating their wants and needs effectively, and kind of just expecting law enforcement to be able to read their mind. Which, I get it. Like, when I call the police, which I do all the time because I have a lot of issues at my house, I expect, I just expect them to take care of it, but I know better. And so I am a pain in the butt. I want you know, and I'm usually out in the thick of it, which I shouldn't do, but I am very clear about what I want. Because I just know how it works. And like you said, if you take anything away from this conversation, if you never talk to me again and we never communicated about the Peninsula problems again, take with you that communication breakdown is going to be the main factor if you don't get what you're looking for out of a law enforcement contact.
So can I follow up? I'm wondering, when you started your answer, you said that when Mario said that we all know where this fellow lives and we see him all the time. And so you said, if that's the case, we can do something about that. Does that just mean you can give him a ticket, or what kind of evidence do you need? So we see his tracks in the dunes every day. He's got a very distinctive, one tire has no tread, yada, yada. You know, we can take we have taken pictures of his tread marks on the beach. He's out almost every night. We don't have to listen to it because we don't live on that side of the highway. But so, and then we see him all around town constantly, you know, and he's got a young rider on the back. Sometimes they have a helmet, sometimes they don't. What can you do? You said we can take care of that. What can you do, and what evidence do you need in order to be able to do that specifically?
So there's two answers to that. There's the above board letter of the law answer, and then there's the down and dirty truth. Which one do you want?
Let's have both.
Well, if you, what I mean by that is that I've never heard anything about it, but if we know that somebody's out there and potentially committing crimes, even if they're small, involved in this stuff, then we can concentrate enforcement that way and try to catch him or use your evidence to do so. The other answer is that if you're telling me this guy's there, even if we don't know he's committing a crime, we can still give him law enforcement attention, which he probably doesn't want. And in doing so, we may or may not find him to have committed a crime, be in commission of a crime, or being prepared to commit a crime, which gives us reasonable suspicion to detain him and look further into what he's doing, to check the quad, to see if it's stolen. Is it registered? Does he have warrants? Is he on probation? Is he in possession of something he's not supposed to? So do you see what I mean? Like, if you're presenting evidence of a crime, we can act on that if it meets the requirements, because obviously whether we can take action depends on what the level of crime is. If it's something that didn't happen in our presence and it's not a felony or one of a very few specific misdemeanors, you would have to basically make a citizen's arrest and present that arrest to us for us to accept and write a ticket for. I doubt that people want to do that with. So I think that putting us on the trail of where you think something's happening, kind of like, not like there's a fire right there, but there's smoke, so there's probably fire, and letting us investigate the smoke is kind of what I mean. And that's how a lot of crime suppression occurs and how a lot of crimes are solved or prevented, is that law enforcement is told where stuff might be occurring, the type of activity that you don't want in your neighborhood. And we put resources there when we can to look into it.
So reporting it on your website.
Yes, there's another part to that question though. So if you are witnessing an in progress emergency, there's something going on that needs immediate assistance, life safety type stuff, call 911. If you're reporting that you're the victim of a crime and it's not an emergency, you're not in danger, no one else is in danger, it doesn't require an immediate response, or it does, but not an emergency, you would call the non-emergency line. If you're not the victim of a crime, but you see something suspicious, something that needs to be checked on, you know, somebody looks like they're in distress, not an emergency, but suspicious person, suspicious vehicle, you know, something illegal maybe occurring like a camp, that's a non-emergency line call. Now, if you have a habitual problem in your neighborhood, it's not occurring right now. Like there's a guy that lives in a homeless camp who rides the yellow quad around and you think he's involved in a bunch of activity, but it's not occurring right now. That's something that you would call our tip line and report. And it's a voice message machine. You can leave your name and number and provide further information, or you can leave it anonymously. And that's something that me and the special services unit, we check those messages routinely. We start files. We work long-term cases off of crime tips. That's not the appropriate place to report being the victim of a crime or reporting an emergency. That's not even to report something that's happening right now, because we're not monitoring that message and responding immediately. That's hey, there's a problem in my neighborhood. There's a lot of homeless that are camping in the dunes. I'd like somebody to look into it. This is where it's at, and this is what information I have about it. That's appropriate for the tip line, which is part of our fledgling problem morning policing program that I mentioned earlier.
All right, and there's one other, it's 7:29, but there's one other question in the chat that says, do sheriff deputies receive any environmental training similar to domestic abuse training or other criminal infractions?
You know, I have to admit, it's almost been 21 years since I went through the basic police academy. So I don't know, I don't recall if they covered environmental crimes to a great extent when I went through, and I'm not 100% sure what they teach now. I think that's more stuff that is kind of accrued through time and position and service and working with other agencies. I mean, there are environmental crimes that are part of, the health and safety code or the business and professions code, or even the penal code. But I wouldn't say that deputies get any tremendous amount of extra training in those areas. Fish and Wildlife does a lot more of the environmental stuff. And honestly, just like you see with cannabis cultivation, that's not, not permitted and not legalized, the biggest enforcement of that now is not criminal, it's environmental. And I think that people in law enforcement are seeing that is a more effective way of tackling camping and trespassing on public, the stuff that we used to deal with criminal charges that no longer are allowed anymore. Environmental violation enforcement is definitely the new drive on the criminal side. However, I think it's a lot subject to interpretation as well. I mean, it's going to require good documentation. I mean, deputies aren't going to take soil samples and stuff like that. And it's kind of what I'm getting at, that we would document, hopefully through a well-written narrative and through photographs, maybe interviews, opinion, but we are working more with partner agencies like code enforcement, coastal commission, hazmat, but they're not going to be there on every call. That's more of like a planned operation type response. So if we were doing a joint outreach response to the camps and the dunes, and we brought partner agencies to do parallel investigations on their specialty, then that would get done. If you're talking about a deputy who just responded because you called in a suspicious person, and they're going to assess what they can, but what they're able to recognize as an environmental violation is going to be very specific to their experience level.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Undersheriff Braud, and for everyone that was able to participate in the forum. I think there's a lot of good questions, a lot of really helpful and nuanced responses. So thank you very much for that. It is a couple minutes after 7:30, so I want to make sure that we respect all of our time. Just for some next steps, this session was recorded, so we'll be able to share that with folks that wanted to attend but could not. I also took notes on the responses that I think would probably be more digestible for more people. So I think we will share those. And JD, we will work with you just if you want to review any notes, but I tried to stick with what was said and summarize. If we have additional questions or if community members do, it will be great for the PCC to continue having a line of communication with you, Undersheriff. And thank you for being so responsive. so far. And one question that we wondered was just of your thoughts for having a follow-up discussion or forum such as this. And if we could, perhaps aim to have a follow-up either with addressing questions that were asked tonight, or if new things arise, and to plan that for like the early spring, like in a couple months time or later winter, and just your thoughts on the timing for a next forum or check-in.
My schedule is so unpredictable. I'm going to do what I can to be available. I'm continuing to work on these projects outside of this. I would highly encourage between this time and our next meeting everyone to look into starting neighborhood watches in their particular neighborhoods if they haven't already. And if you are, I can arrange if you guys email me contacts of who I can have Ginger Campbell, our neighborhood watch coordinator, reach out to. I would also figure out maybe in a group communication between all of you, it's really helpful to, like everybody prioritize their top 3 issues that they have personally. And I think even before our next meeting, maybe you guys could present that all. And then when you see all of the issues together, and then as a group vote on what are the 3 priorities, it kind of pairs down. Cause I mean, tackling everything all at once is not very effective or not a good use of resources. I think figuring out what are the big things or the prioritized things that we want as a Peninsula community to accomplish. We can prioritize those or maybe take on some small ones that are easy fixes. It gets momentum. It gives people hope. It establishes rapport and relationships between all of you on working together and solving problems. And what you'll find is that many of these things you will probably solve without law enforcement assistance, just once you start looking at it from a problem solving standpoint, like it sounds like some of you already are. And it's contagious, and then that builds upon the relationship with us and working with us. And I can continue to facilitate that. But I think at least prior to the next meeting, I would think it would be very fruitful for you guys to, kind of get to everybody kind of brainstorm their 3 top, maybe even put it on a board or send it out in an email and have everybody look at the entire list, and then everybody votes what they think are the top 3. And they may find that their top 3 aren't what they vote for, because when you see everybody's problems and you only can focus on 3 at a time, then it puts it in perspective what we should focus on, knowing that you may not get your problem addressed initially. But if we start at the major issues and work our way down, the smaller issues may get taken care of inadvertently along the way. But either way, you're making progress and you're addressing the bigger health safety issues first. But I think that would be my best advice, is to try to start coordinating how you guys are going to communicate as a group, and arrange some way so everybody can kind of give their input on what their priorities are, and then get to see what everybody else's are. And that way, when I come back to talk to you guys, you guys can present more of like a targeted approach on what you want to focus on. Obviously, if you want to bring your problems to me outside of that, call the tip line. If you have specific stuff like the yellow quad, call the tip line and leave your information or your contact number, and I can call you back or assign somebody to call you back at a later time. Another thing that I will talk about at the next meeting, if I'm able to participate, is some of the other pop concepts that we use that are just good kind of reflections that I think you guys will see the value of, kind of like what we talked about with the crime prevention through environmental design, but some other similar ones that will kind of change your outlook on taking a proactive approach to improving your community, and then working with law enforcement to help accentuate that. So that's my input for further working together.
Great. No, thank you for that. The Peninsula Community Collaborative as a whole does meet monthly, and so is often prioritizing issues and and issues to work on. And just in the last few years, I definitely would say that dumping and illegal driving in the dunes has continued to be issues that seem to overlap of working with a lot of different partners, including law enforcement. So I bet we'll have more of those concerns. But thank you for those great next steps. Really appreciate your time. And if we didn't get to address your question, we'll just make follow up. But I think that the undersheriff gave a lot of great ideas and tips, and a key focus on communication and being really clear with our requests. So yeah, thank you everyone for your time. And I see Jody. Would you like?
I was just saying bye to Jen. She got off the call. But yeah, thank you, Undersheriff Braud, for coming tonight and all that information. Thank you.
Yeah,
Love your dog, just saying.
Thank you.
Very sweet.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.